John Carpenter's Halloween perfected the art of scares. It made us afraid of something as simple as a guy in overalls walking down the street, very, very slowly. This low-budget slasher about a silent psychopath stalking a nanny in a quiet suburb became the grandfather of an entire genre. But how well do you really know this 1978 masterpiece? We've got 20 surprising facts about the film that made William Shatner's face truly terrifying in a way that Star Trek never dreamed possible. And we'll start with fact number 1, another iconic horror figure who was in the background years before he started haunting your dreams. Michael Myers never speaks, and that's the whole point. It's a decision that transformed Halloween from a simple killer movie into a true myth. Think about it. Michael doesn't sneer, he doesn't threaten, he doesn't make manifestos. He's not someone to be negotiated with. He can't beg for mercy, because he doesn't even accept pleas. He just is. This eerie silence, broken only by his heavy breathing through his mask, strips him of any humanity. He becomes less human than a natural disaster. Dr. Loomis was right when he said that there's nothing in his eyes but darkness. His lack of a voice makes him a canvas for our worst fears. We don't know what he's thinking, or if he's feeling anything at all. He's the shape, as he's described in the credits, and that shape is perfectly filled with our own primal panic. He is an irresistible force, an absolute evil that needs no words to declare itself. His actions are his only means of communication, and they speak far more eloquently than any words. Michael's disappearance in the finale. Loomis shoots him 6 times. 6. He flies off the balcony and falls to the lawn. It seems like it's over. Laurie is finally safe. Loomis looks down, and the body is gone. This isn't just a cheap trick for a sequel, although it worked perfectly for him. It was a conscious decision by John Carpenter to emphasize the main idea of the film. Evil cannot be killed with 6 bullets. Michael Myers is not just a man in a mask. He is the boogeyman. He is the embodiment of fear. And fear does not die. He simply disappears from view to wait in the darkness. The final montage of empty rooms and dark streets to the accompaniment of Michael's breathing is pure horror genius. It tells the viewer, he's not dead. He's still there. He could be anywhere. There is no sense of relief, no happy ending. The film leaves you with the eerie realization that evil is not defeated. It is simply lurking. It is the perfect ending that has turned the film into an urban legend, the iconic mask. This is probably the most well-known fact, but the details are amazing. The film had a meager budget, so the crew had to improvise. Production designer Tommy Lee Wallace went to a costume shop and bought 2 masks. One was a clown mask, which would have been too obvious, considering Michael's first murder, and the other was a mask of William Shatner as Captain Kirk from Star Trek for $1.98. They chose Kirk, and that's where the magic begins. They enlarged the eye sockets, dyed his hair darker, and covered his entire face in ghostly white paint. The result was terrifying. They took a familiar, heroic face and transformed it into something empty, inhuman, and devoid of any emotion. The mask became the perfect visual representation of Michael's inner world, a complete void. The irony is that the face of one of science fiction's most iconic heroes, a symbol of logic and humanism, has become the face of pure, gratuitous evil. It's a perfect example of how budget constraints can give birth to brilliant creative solutions. The visual isolation of Laurie Strode. This is a more subtle, but extremely important detail. Dean Cundey's cinematography and Carpenter's direction are a masterclass in visual storytelling. Notice how Laurie is presented in the frame, especially compared to her friends Annie and Linda. As they leave school, Annie and Linda are chatting about boys, parties, and the two of them together, often in the center of the frame. Laurie is almost always slightly behind or to the side. She is isolated. The camera constantly places her at the edge of the frame, or shows her alone, watching. Even when she is in class, Michael watches her through the window, visually separating her from the safe, normal world inside. This visual isolation does 2 things. First, it emphasizes her character. She is more serious, intelligent, not like everyone else. Second, it makes her the perfect final girl. She is already alone, even before Michael starts killing her friends. This technique makes us subconsciously feel her vulnerability and at the same time her uniqueness. The $10,000 soundtrack. John Carpenter is a man of many talents. In addition to directing and co-writing the screenplay, he wrote and performed the entire soundtrack for the film himself, and he did it in just a few weeks, with a ridiculous budget of $10,000. Legend has it that after the first screening without music, one of the studio executives said that the film wasn't scary at all. Carpenter knew that music was the key. He sat down at the synthesizer and created one of the most recognizable and influential soundtracks in film history. The main theme, with its unconventional 5/4 time signature, is simple but incredibly unsettling. It sounds like a broken nursery rhyme. The music in Halloween is not just background, it is fear. It functions as Michael's own theme. Those same piercing piano notes are the sonic equivalent of his knife. They appear out of nowhere and instantly build tension, even when nothing is happening on screen. This minimalist approach, born of necessity, proved that true horror doesn't require an entire orchestra. Halloween is a master class in the use of fake scares. These are not just cheap screamers, they are a psychological game with the viewer. John Carpenter skillfully prepares us, forcing us to expect a threat from every dark corner. Let's remember the scene where Linda's friend suddenly jumps out from behind the bushes in a sheet, imitating a ghost. It makes us jump and then exhale with relief. But what makes this moment brilliant? It trains us. It teaches us that a threat can be anywhere, and that it can look like a sheet. So later, when Michael puts on a sheet to trick Linda, our brains are already programmed to fear. But we don't immediately realize that this time the danger is real. Carpenter deliberately increases our level of anxiety. He keeps making us think Michael is just around the corner, and then he shows us that it's just a friend, or a cat, or a branch. It's a spring winding technique. He does it over and over again, and when the spring of our tension is stretched to its limit, he finally delivers. The real Michael shows up when we least expect it, and the effect is tenfold. The film is set in the fictional Haddonfield, Illinois. The atmosphere of a cool, gloomy fall evening in a Midwestern suburb is a key element of the film. But here's the problem. Halloween was filmed in Pasadena, California, in the spring. The task of recreating Illinois and California was almost impossible, and the way the crew pulled it off is a cinematic marvel. The main problem was the palm trees. They're literally everywhere in Southern California. Cinematographer Dean Cundy had to carefully line up each shot so that not a single palm tree would fall on screen and ruin the illusion. But the biggest legend is the leaves. To create the feeling of fall, the crew carried bags of painted, dried leaves with them. Before each outdoor take, they scattered the leaves on the sidewalks and lawns. And after filming, they carefully packed it back into bags to transport to the next location. It was a titanic job. Given the meager budget, they literally created autumn frame, by hand. And it worked. We don't doubt for a second that we are in a cold, sleepy town, where something terrible is hiding among the yellowed leaves. Halloween practically invented the rules of slasher films, the most famous of which is sin equals death. It's a trope that has been exploited and parroted mercilessly for decades to come. Look at the victims. Annie smokes pot and is about to abandon the child she's babysitting to meet a guy. She dies. Linda and her boyfriend Bob sneak into an empty house solely to have sex. They die. Their moral transgressions, sex, drugs, irresponsibility, mark them as targets for Michael. And who survives? Laurie Strode. She's smart, responsible, she doesn't smoke, she doesn't drink, and she's chaste. She spends the evening dutifully babysitting the kids. In this context, Michael Myers becomes not just a killer, but some kind of terrifying, puritanical force. He's the boogeyman, who comes to punish teenagers for their sins. This moralistic structure, whether consciously or not, became the foundation of the genre. Laurie is the archetype of the final girl who survives precisely because she is pure. This formula defined an entire generation of horror films. There is almost no blood in the film. This may shock a modern viewer accustomed to fake blood in horror films. Halloween is rated R, but by today's standards it is incredibly restrained. We are almost never shown the actual moment of the murder in gory detail, and that is why it is so scary. Carpenter understood a fundamental truth: what we do not see, but are forced to imagine, is much more terrible than what can be shown. The horror of Halloween is built not on shock, but on suspense, on unbearable anticipation. Recall the murder of Bob. We do not see the knife enter him. We see him rise into the air, pinned to the wall, and then the eerie, inquisitive tilt of Michael's head. The horror is not in the blood, but in this inhuman, animal curiosity. When Linda is strangled with a telephone wire, the scariest part is the sound of her gasping, mixed with Laurie's normal voice on the other end of the wire. Halloween doesn't try to make you sick, it tries to get under your skin using atmosphere, shadows, music, and our own imaginations. Michael Myers has been played by 6 different people. This fact shatters the myth of a single actor behind the mask and perfectly underscores the idea that Michael is not a person but a form. First, there's Will Sandon, who played 6-year-old Michael in the famous opening scene. Then, of course, there's Nick Castle, Carpenter's friend, who played Form in most of the scenes. Carpenter chose him because he liked his feline fluid gait. For the scene where Michael finally takes off his mask, actor Tony Moran was used because they wanted him angelic yet strange face. Stuntman Jim Winburn performed the most dangerous stunt, falling off a balcony after being shot 6 times by Loomis. Production designer Tommy Lee Wallace also wore the costume for some scenes, such as when Michael breaks through a closet. And the most amazing fact, in the opening scene, shot from first person, the small hands holding the knife are the hands of producer and co-writer Deborah Gill. So, the shape is literally a composite image created by 6 different people, which only adds to its mystique and inhumanity. The mask is not just white. Pay attention to the lighting, especially in the night scenes. Dean Cundy, the cinematographer, often lit it with a cold, blue light. It transforms it from a simple mask into something ghostly. This blue-white hue is not natural. It doesn't look like skin. It looks like marble, like moonlight, like the cold of a corpse. It makes Michael's face not just empty, but otherworldly. He doesn't look like a person wearing a mask. He looks like something that came from another, colder dimension. It's a deliberate visual choice that reinforces his status as the boogeyman. He doesn't belong in the warm, lit world of the living. He belongs in the blue shadows, and the color of his mask reflects that at every turn. This detail transforms him from a simple killer into a true ghost. In the film's credits, he's not listed as Michael Myers. He's the Shape. This is one of the most important decisions that defines the entire film. Michael Myers is the name of a child, a boy who killed his sister. But what returned to Haddonfield 15 years later is no longer a person. It is shape. Think about what that word means. A shape is just a silhouette. It is an outline in the dark. It has no personality, no motives, no soul. This is the perfect definition for Michael. He is a void in the shape of a man. By calling him Shape, the filmmakers are telling us that we should not try to understand him. He cannot be cured or explained in terms of human psychology. He is absolute, faceless evil. It is not a who, it is a what, and that what has hit home. Tommy Doyle, the boy Laurie looks after, is not just a child. He is the only one who really understands what is happening. The adults and teenagers in the film are too busy going about their own business, dating, partying, having sex. They ignore the signs. They rationalize away the fear. But Tommy is obsessed with the boogeyman. He sees him from his window. He talks about him. To Lori, these are just childish fears, a fairy tale. But in the world of Halloween, fairy tales are real. Tommy is the only one who correctly identifies the threat. He is the voice of truth in the film. He sees the world as it really is that night, a place where the boogeyman could be standing on your street corner. His fear is not a childish fantasy. It is the only adequate response to the evil that has invaded their town. He understands the threat far better than any of the adults. Michael Myers never runs. That's a fundamental rule of his character. His victims run, scream, fall, panic. They expend an insane amount of energy. Michael doesn't. He just walks. That slow, inexorable, methodical gait is one of the scariest things in the movie. Why? Because it carries a fatal certainty. He doesn't need to rush. He knows he'll catch up. That gait turns him into a force of nature, like approaching death, or like an inescapable fate. It makes the chase all the more terrifying. You can run as fast as you can, but if you look back for a moment, he's still there, walking calmly, and the distance between you is closed. It's a psychological attack. He breaks the victim's will by demonstrating that escape is impossible. Remember that bully Lonnie Elam? The guy who bullied Tommy Doyle outside the Myers house and bragged about going there later? The movie gives him a lot of attention early on. We see him scaring Tommy. We hear Lori mention him. He's a clear part of the world of Haddonfield. And then, he just disappears. The movie never returns to him. Did he go to the Myers house? Did he fall victim to Michael somewhere off screen? Did he just change his mind and go home? We never find out. And that ambiguity is scary. The movie makes you feel like there are other terrible things going on in the darkness of Haddonfield that we don't even know about. It makes the world of the movie bigger and more dangerous, because the threat isn't limited to what we see on screen. This is perhaps the most disturbing and analyzed moment in the entire film. After Michael kills Bob by impaling him against the wall with a knife, he doesn't run. He doesn't hide. He stops and looks at his work. And then he does this strange, slow tilt of his head. It's not triumph. It's not pleasure, as humans understand it. It's curiosity. It's the tilt of the head of an animal trying to understand a strange object. It's like a cat looking at a toy it has caught. This gesture completely strips Michael of any human trait. He doesn't see Bob as a person. He sees an object, and he seems surprised or intrigued by what he's just done. This little movement tells us more about his psyche than any dialogue. It's pure, inhuman, detached curiosity about death. Lori does this twice. It's one of those moments that makes the audience scream at the screen. No! Get the knife! After she stabs Michael with a knitting needle, and then with his knife, she throws the weapon on the floor. She does it again in the closet after hitting him with the coat hanger. From a logical point of view, it's crazy. But from a psychological point of view, it's absolutely brilliant. Lori is not a killer. She's just a normal, scared-to-death girl. Her brain is not designed for this kind of situation. As soon as the immediate threat seems to be gone, her first instinct is to get rid of the horrible, dirty object that is the knife. She's not thinking like a warrior. She's thinking like a victim who's just been given a moment of respite. This mistake makes her incredibly human. It highlights a fundamental difference between her and him. He would never have dropped his weapon. She can't bring herself to hold it. This trope of the final girl dropping her weapon has become a classic of the genre, and Halloween was one of the first and best to do so. Michael's heavy breathing. It's essentially his voice, and it wasn't added in post-production in a sterile studio. Nick Castle, who played Form, breathed into the mask during filming, and the sound engineer recorded it live. This decision had a colossal effect. The sound is not clean. It's muffled, claustrophobic, resonant. You hear the air bouncing off the inside of the latex. It creates an eerie feeling that you're in the mask with him. That breathing is not just a sound. It's a constant, inescapable reminder of his presence. It becomes the soundtrack to his walk, just as methodical and relentless. In the final scene, when we hear only that breathing against the backdrop of empty buildings, it becomes omnipresent. He's no longer just a man. He's a spirit himself, a ghost breathing into the back of your head. And all this thanks to the simple decision to record real breathing from under a real mask. $250. That's how much actor Tony Moran got for being the only face of adult Michael Myers we see in the film. It's just one scene, literally a few seconds, when Laurie rips off his mask. But this scene is key. The creators wanted him angelic but strange face to show the contrast between the innocent appearance of the child he once was and the monster he became. Tony Moran was the perfect fit. And for this iconic moment, which will be discussed for decades, he got $250. It's a prime example of how low budget this film was. Every penny counted. The irony is that this short shot, which cost the studio a penny, became one of the most famous revelations in horror history. This face, which was etched in memory, cost less than renting some equipment for a day. Imagine this: you're a young actor trying to make it in Hollywood. Your friend is making a small, independent horror film. They're broke and need help to scatter fake fall leaves on the streets because they're filming Illinois in sunny California. You agree to help. Your friend's name is John Carpenter, and your name is Robert Englund. Yes, the same Robert Englund who, 6 years later, would change the horror genre forever by playing Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's one of the most amazing coincidences in movie history. A future iconic villain helped set the tone for the debut of another iconic villain. Robert Englund, the man who would become the epitome of 80s horror, literally swept up, or more accurately, scattered, leaves on the set of Halloween. It proves how small the world of independent film was, and how two horror titans crossed paths before they became legends.